Brother got a firm handshake and a set of keys to the lake house. I got a Venmo request for my share of the catering bill. My dad sent it at 9:47 on a Sunday morning, 2 hours after the party ended. $43 for the appetizers I hadn't touched because I'd spent the whole evening refilling drinks and stacking plates while everyone else clinked glasses and said, "Finally, and you deserve this, buddy," to my brother, who was standing in the living room holding those keys like he'd just pulled a sword from a stone. I sat in my car in my parents' driveway and paid it. Didn't say a word. That was 8 months ago. A lot has changed since then. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I should tell you something about my family first, because none of what happened later makes sense without it. My parents have 2 kids. My brother Cole is 31, 3 years younger than me, and he has always been the one they talk about at dinner parties, the one they framed photos of, the one who got a car for his 16th birthday, while I got a handshake and a speech about responsibility and the value of saving up. I'm not bitter about the car. I got over that in roughly 2 weeks. What I never got over was how normal it seemed to them, how they never noticed the gap they were carving between us year after year, like they were doing it with a butter knife, slowly, casually, without ever looking down. Cole isn't a bad person, I want to say that clearly. He's actually kind of oblivious, which in some ways is worse, because you can't even be angry at him directly. He just floats through life accepting things, the way you accept that the sun rises or that it's going to rain in April. Our parents gave and he received, and he genuinely never seemed to wonder why I wasn't receiving the same things. I moved to Austin after college. My parents are in Nashville. Cole stayed close, 20 minutes from the house, and I think that's when the distance became something more than just geography. I stopped being a real presence in their daily decisions. I became the daughter they called on holidays and texted when they needed someone to explain their health insurance portal. I built a life in Austin. I'm a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm. I have a studio apartment that I like, a savings account that I fund carefully and deliberately, and a cat named Fig who has strong opinions about when it's time for bed. I am not glamorous. I am not struggling either. I am solidly, quietly fine, and I used to think that was enough. My grandmother passed away in March. She and I were close in the particular way that grandchildren and grandparents sometimes are, not in a daily phone call way, but in a she saw me way. She asked about my job. She remembered the name of a coworker I'd complained about once, 2 years earlier. When I visited, she made coffee the way I liked it, without asking. Those things matter more than people realize. She died on a Thursday. Her name was Constance, and she was 81 years old, and she had a house in Knoxville that she'd lived in for 43 years. I drove up for the funeral, took 4 days off work, booked a room at a Hampton Inn 12 minutes from the church, and told myself I was just there to say goodbye. I didn't think about the house. I didn't think about the estate. That's not why I came. My aunt, my dad's sister Vivian, pulled me aside at the reception afterward. She pressed my hand in both of hers and said, "Your grandmother talked about you a lot, sweetheart. You should know that." I thought it was just something people say at funerals. I thanked her and went back to the buffet. The will reading was 3 weeks later. I drove back up to Knoxville on a Wednesday, took a half day from work, and sat in the office of a probate attorney named Mr. Halstead, who had the kind of mustache that implies a person has had it since 1987 and has never once questioned it. My parents were there. Cole was there with his girlfriend Bree, who kept her sunglasses on her head even inside and checked her phone twice before things got started. My Aunt Vivienne sat next to me. My grandmother left Cole $22,000 in a brokerage account. She left my parents her china set, some furniture, and a certificate of deposit worth about $14,000. She left me the house. The Knoxville house. All 1,400 square feet of it. The half-acre lot. The garage with the stuck door. The kitchen she'd repainted 4 times because she could never decide on the right shade of yellow. All of it. Outright. No strings. The room went very quiet. My dad cleared his throat. My mother looked at my father. Cole looked at the table. Bree finally put her phone down. Mr. Halstead kept reading. There was a personal letter, also addressed to me. He handed it to me in a sealed envelope and said my grandmother had requested I read it privately. I held that envelope in my lap for the rest of the meeting. My hands were completely steady. I don't know how. The drive back to my hotel took 11 minutes. I sat in the parking lot and opened the envelope. My grandmother's handwriting was small and slightly left-leaning, the way it always had been. She wrote in blue ink on her personal stationery, cream-colored, with a little border of ivy at the top. She wrote that she'd watched me for 34 years, that she'd seen what she called the arithmetic of how your parents love, and that she'd decided a long time ago to balance the books in whatever way she could. She wrote that the house was mine because she trusted me to do something good with it. Not because I was the oldest, not because of anything I'd done or hadn't done, but because she believed I'd had fewer soft landings in my life and she wanted to give me one. She ended it by saying that she hoped I'd sit on the back porch sometimes and think of her because she'd always done her best thinking there. I read it twice. Then I folded it very carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I sat there for about 20 minutes not doing anything at all. My dad called that night at 8:15. I knew when I saw his name on the screen what the call was going to be. You develop a kind of fluency with people's patterns after 34 years. You learn when something is a check-in and when it's something else. He asked how I was doing. I said I was okay. He said the will had been a surprise to everyone. I agreed that it had been. Then he said, we were thinking, the fair thing might be to sell the house and split the proceeds. Grandma probably didn't think through what it would mean for the family dynamic. I said, Grandma was pretty sharp, Dad. I think she thought it through. He went quiet for a second. Then he said they'd talk more when things settled down. I said okay. We hung up. I ordered Thai food to my room and watched a home renovation show until I fell asleep, which felt, under the circumstances, darkly appropriate. The calls didn't stop. Over the next 6 weeks, I heard some variation of the same conversation 4 times. My dad called twice. My mother called once. Hers was more emotional, which was harder to sit through. Because my mother crying makes me feel like a rope someone has twisted too tight, even when I know I haven't done anything wrong. Cole called once, which surprised me. His version was the gentlest of all of them. He said he wasn't sure what the right thing was, and that he didn't want this to become weird between us. I appreciated that. I told him it wouldn't. What none of them said directly, but what hummed underneath every single conversation, was that they wanted the house to go to Cole. He and Bree had been talking about buying something. The timing was convenient. The Knoxville house was move-in ready. My grandmother had not, as far as my family was concerned, made the optimal distribution. I listened to all of it. I took notes, not then, but afterward in a running document on my phone. Dates, times, what was said, what was asked. I'm a project manager. Documentation is just how my brain works. I also made an appointment with a real estate attorney in Austin. And then, quietly, with no announcement, I started doing my homework. Here's what I found out. The house had been assessed the previous fall at $312,000. Nashville's market had softened a little, but Knoxville's was still reasonably strong. A house in that neighborhood, in that condition, with that lot size, was worth holding. I also found out something else. When I was 27, my parents had taken out a home equity loan. I didn't know this at the time. Why would I? They'd never mentioned it. But I had found, in a box of papers my grandmother kept in her study, a box Mr. Halstead had released to me along with the property documents, a copy of a loan application. My name was on it, not as a co-borrower, not as anyone who'd been asked. My name, my social security number, used as an additional reference to strengthen the application. A box had been checked indicating that I had agreed to be a guarantor. I had not agreed to that. I had not signed anything. I had not been told. I went very still when I read it, the kind of still that isn't calm. It's the moment just before something shifts, when your brain is processing faster than your face can move. I took photos of every page. I put the originals back in the box. I did not call my parents. I did not mention what I'd found. I said nothing. I drove back to Austin on a Sunday, unloaded my bag, fed Fig, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee that got cold before I touched it. I called my attorney Monday morning. Her name is Dana. She's been my attorney for 3 years, ever since I needed help with a contractor dispute at work, and liked how she talked. She is extremely direct and not particularly warm, which is exactly what I need from someone who represents my interests. I told Dana everything. The house, the loan application, my name, the box of papers. She was quiet for about 4 seconds, which for Dana is a long time. She said, "Do you want to know your options, or do you want me to tell you what I do?" I said both. She told me both. Over the next 2 months, I did 3 things. The first thing I did was get the house formally appraised and transferred into my name through probate, a process Mr. Halstead's office handled, which was moving forward regardless. I coordinated, I signed, I showed up when I needed to. The second thing I did was have Danae send a formal inquiry to my parents' mortgage servicer about the loan application from 7 years ago. This was not to blow anything up. This was to get documentation. Dana said that if my information had been used without my consent, even if the loan had since been paid off, that was a problem worth having on paper. The third thing I did was say yes. My dad called in late May and asked, one more time, if I'd be willing to discuss options for the property. He phrased it carefully, the way he does when he's rehearsed something. I said, "Actually, yes, I think we should talk in person. Can you and Mom come to Austin? Or should I come to Nashville? I have some things I'd like to discuss too." He said Nashville would be easier. I said that was fine. We set a date for the first Saturday in June. I booked a flight. I packed the copy of the loan application, the appraisal, and a printed letter from Dana outlining my legal position in clear, jargon-free paragraphs. I also brought my grandmother's letter. Not for them, for me. I put it in my bag the morning I left and didn't take it out until I was on the plane, and I read it one more time at 30,000 feet, somewhere over Arkansas, with the little window shade up, and the clouds outside looking like something from a painting. She always did her best thinking on the back porch. I was starting to understand why. I arrived at my parents' house at 11 in the morning. The azaleas by the front walk were blooming, deep pink, the way they always are in early June in Nashville. My mother must have watered them carefully all spring. She loves those azaleas. That's the thing about my parents. They are genuinely good at some things. They are attentive to plants. They keep a clean house. They remember birthdays. They are not monsters. That's never been the point. The point is the invisible math, the accumulated small decisions that added up over 34 years to a certain answer about which child mattered more in practical terms, even if they would never say it out loud, even if they would be horrified if you said it to them. My mother had made lunch. That's also very her, to diffuse tension with food. There were sandwiches on a platter, a bowl of fruit salad, iced tea in the good pitcher with the lemon slices. I appreciated it even knowing what it was. We sat at the kitchen table. Cole wasn't there, which I had expected. This was a parent conversation. My dad started. He'd clearly prepared a version of what he wanted to say, that the house had sentimental value for the whole family, that selling it and dividing the money 4 ways would be the fairest solution, that Grandma's intentions had been good, but that she might not have fully considered the impact on family unity. I let him finish. I didn't interrupt. My mother added a few things, softer, more emotional, more about keeping the peace. When they were done, I reached into my bag. I set Dana's letter on the table first, then the appraisal. Then I placed the copy of the loan application face up between us. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. My mother looked at it, then at me. Her face did something complicated. My dad reached over and picked it up. He looked at it for what felt like a long time. When he put it back down, his voice was a half step quieter than it had been. "That was a difficult time financially," he said. "I know," I said. "I didn't know about it at the time, though." He said that they hadn't thought it would cause any issues, that the loan was paid off, that I'm not here to cause trouble, I said. I want to be really clear about that. Dana's letter explains my legal position, but I'm not planning to escalate this unless I need to. I'm here because I wanted you to understand what I know and what I've decided. They were both looking at me. My mother had set down her iced tea. "I'm keeping the house," I said. I'm going to rent it out for now and hold it as an investment. That's my decision and it's my legal right under Grandma's will. I don't want to fight about it. I don't want to spend the next year having the same conversation. I want to go back to being your daughter without this hanging over everything. I paused. But I need you to know that I found the loan application, and I need you to understand what it means to me that it existed. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a lawnmower started up somewhere down the street. My dad looked at the table. My mother pressed her fingers to her lips. I picked up my tea and took a sip and let the silence do its work. There's a thing that happens sometimes when you stop absorbing all the discomfort in a room. When you stop being the person who steps in to make things easier, who rushes to fill the quiet with reassurances, who says it's fine before anyone has even asked. When you just stop. The room doesn't collapse. People don't disintegrate. They sit there and they feel what they've been handing you to feel for years, and it's uncomfortable, and it should be. My dad spoke first. He said he was sorry. Not in the way people sometimes apologize when they want the subject to change. He said it slowly, without looking away, and he said the specific thing that they should have told me about the loan, that they should have asked, that it wasn't right. My mother said less. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine, and I let her keep it there. We didn't resolve everything that afternoon. Some things don't resolve over sandwiches and iced tea, but something shifted. The kind of shift you can feel even when you can't quite name it. Some pressure that had been in the room for a very long time. We talked for another hour about ordinary things. My job. Cole and Bree's new apartment, the azaleas. When I left, my dad walked me to my car. He stood on the sidewalk while I put my bag in the back seat. He said, "You turned out really well, you know." I looked at him for a second. "I know," I said. "I worked hard at it." I wasn't unkind when I said it. I meant it both ways, as something true about myself and as something I needed him to understand had happened without much help from them. He nodded slowly, like he was adding something up. I drove to the airport. My flight wasn't until 6, so I sat in a Terminal B coffee shop with a latte and the kind of tiredness that comes after something ends. Not sad, not exactly relieved, just emptied out in a quiet way. I texted Cole. "Hey. Just wanted you to know I had a good talk with Mom and Dad. We're okay." He replied in about 30 seconds. "Really? That's great. You okay?" I said. "Yeah, I'm good." And I was. For the first time in a while, I actually was. The house in Knoxville is rented now. A couple in their early 30s. Both teachers, very conscientious about the yard. They text me photos of the garden sometimes, which I did not ask for and genuinely love. I went back in September to make sure the transition was smooth. I sat on the back porch the afternoon before I flew home. It was one of those September days that hasn't decided yet whether it's summer or fall, warm enough to have the door open, cool enough to want a jacket. The yard smelled like cut grass and something faintly sweet I couldn't identify. I thought about my grandmother, about the letter, about the $43 I'd Venmo'd my dad at 9:37 on a Sunday morning 8 months before any of this happened, sitting in that same driveway saying nothing. She said she hoped I'd sit out here and think of her. I did, Grandma. I thought about you a lot. I thought about the quiet that had saved me, the months of listening without reacting, of documenting without escalating, of carrying what I knew carefully, like something fragile. Until the moment it needed to be set down on a table in a kitchen in Nashville, between a fruit salad and a pitcher of iced tea. There's a kind of strength that doesn't look like strength from the outside. It looks like patience. It looks like saying nothing. It looks like being the one who refills the drinks at the party and drives home alone and pays the $43 and doesn't make a scene. But inside it's everything. The teachers who rent the house have a cat. He sits in the window of the front bedroom sometimes when I've video called to check in. My grandmother used to have a cat too years ago before I was born. I only know that because of a photo she kept on her dresser, a gray tabby in a garden that doesn't exist anymore. Theke was asleep on my suitcase when I got home from Knoxville. He opened one eye, registered my presence, and closed it again. I know, I told him. Me too. I put the kettle on. I unpacked. I had work in the morning. Some things don't end dramatically. They just settle, like a house does over time, finding its foundation. Mine did. I've thought a lot about what it actually takes to sit still when everything in you wants to react. Not the dramatic kind of still, not the frozen, dissociating kind. I mean the deliberate kind. The kind where you hear something that would make most people raise their voice, and you just breathe and file it away and keep going. That took me years to learn. I'm not sure I even knew I'd learned it, until I was sitting in a kitchen in Nashville with a fruit salad between us and my dad's voice trailing off into a room that had finally, for once, stopped making excuses. What happened with my grandmother's house taught me something I couldn't have put into words before, that the way you respond to injustice is itself a kind of character, not in a passive swallow it and smile way, but in the sense that your response, the timing of it, the precision of it, what you bring to the table and when, says everything about who you've decided to be. I could have called my dad the night I found that loan application. I wanted to. There was a version of me that was ready to, the version that had been quietly accumulating grievances since a 16th birthday and a handshake instead of a car. That version had a lot to say, but she would have said it badly and at the wrong moment and without anything in her hands except anger, which is not a document and does not hold up in a room. So I waited. I talked to Dana, I took photos, I built something solid out of what I knew, and I carried it carefully until it was time to set it down. That's not passivity. That's the opposite of passivity. It's the hardest kind of discipline there is, the kind that doesn't get seen, because it looks like nothing from the outside. It looks like a woman who paid a $43 Venmo request at 9:47 on a Sunday morning and drove home in silence. What I've come to understand is that most of the power people give away in difficult situations, they give away in the first 5 minutes. In the first phone call, in the first moment of shock, when the impulse is to react immediately and loudly and without thinking. I've done that before. It never ends the way you want it to. You get the brief satisfaction of having said the thing, and then you lose every strategic advantage you ever had, and the other person gets to reframe the whole situation around your reaction instead of their actions. My grandmother understood something about this. She was a quiet woman, not timid, just economical with herself. She watched things. She waited. She made decisions deliberately, and she let them land when the time was right. She'd spent 81 years doing the math on what actually mattered, and when she died, she left her answer in an envelope addressed to me. I think about that when things get hard. Not the house, the letter. The fact that she saw me clearly over a whole lifetime and trusted what she saw. You can't manufacture that kind of trust. You earn it the same way you earn anything real, by doing the right thing over and over in small, unwitnessed moments. By being the person who shows up, who does the work, who pays the $43 and says nothing and gets up the next morning anyway. The accounts do eventually balance. Not because of any cosmic mechanism, but because of simple cause and effect. What you put into your own life, the discipline, the honesty, the refusal to collapse into bitterness, that compounds. And what other people build on shortcuts and borrowed credibility eventually comes due. Cole got the lake house keys. I got a Venmo request. And then my grandmother left me something worth more than either, because she'd been watching the whole time. So had I.